Thanks for joining us at Oran Park, the circuit near Camden, south of Sydney, on a glorious Sydney late winter day. It's a beautiful day for motor racing, and this circuit, for the first time in its 22-year history, under new ownership, a lot of plans for the circuit and some changes as well. Already, there has been a change to the worst section of the long or Grand Prix circuit, a very wiggly, tight section, now joined by two better corners and a straight in between. Today, we'll be seeing live the Valvoline 250, the second round of the Australian Endurance Championship for touring cars. The first round at Amaroo 2 weeks ago, this one of two races before Bathurst, the big one, on September the 30th. During that race there will be driver changes and of course pit stops, and in the pits we'll have Neil Crompton covering for us.
The object of the exercise in endurance racing is to get a touring car in and out as quickly as you can. In the case of the Alan Moffat-Peter Stuyvesant team, they're going to be coming in and putting on 4 tyres and wheels. They're going to dump a couple of churns of fuel, which both have 40 litres in capacity, and they'll also effect a driver change, which is going to take something like around about 25 seconds. For some of the major teams, they haven't been going through pit stops like this for just on 12 months, so a lot of preparation has had to be made to get everybody back in shape once again. We'll be standing by right throughout the course of the day and bringing you all of the pit action. It's going to be very exciting. I hope you can stay with us.
Cars on the grid for the second round of the 1984 Australian Endurance Championship for touring cars. And this is the way the first four line up on the grid in his first race drive since crashing a car, hurting himself at Surfers in May. Alan Moffat on pole position, a 13.1. They're using a new section of track though, remember, so although he is 1.2 seconds faster than Peter Brock's qualifying time for the Touring Car Championship round here in June, they're on a slightly faster section of track. George Fury shares the front row with him. Second row, all Falcons, Dick Johnson and Steve Masterton. The row behind, Jim Richards, the only 6-cylinder car in the race, Bob Stevens, Mazda RX-7, Alan Grice, Peter McLeod. We have to go back quite a long way, in fact to 11th grid position behind Terry Finnegan, Gary Wilmington, to find John Harvey and the Marlborough Holden dealer team car. 100 laps, 262 kilometres around the 2.62 kilometre circuit, and waiting to go. First round won by Nissan. In the commentary box with us, the winner of the Touring Car Championship round here back in May, June, Bob Morris. We'll be talking to him shortly. 25 cars away. Good start by Moffat, bad one by the BMW. Masterton reasonably well, but Johnson better away. Might be able to nip George Fury, but it will be Moffat into the lead. Johnson tucking in behind, goes to second. Well done, goes to first. Well, a bit of aggression there, and Steve Masterton trying to box out Moffat and ride up onto the curbing to avoid him. So potentially some bad manners down there, Bob Morris.
Well, for the start of such a long race, it was quite a dramatic start, and Marston, I think, was a little bit aghast to see his arch rival Dick Johnson make the break. And I guess that's experience, and that's racecraft. But Moffat's right in there. Johnson's moving away though. It's surprising that new part of the circuit seems to favour the larger cars.
Dick very sideways there, and Moffat being haunted by Masterton. Moffat, I don't think, would be too alarmed about being there at the moment, knowing that the bigger cars will potentially have more tyre problems than he. Fury is fourth.
I don't think he'd be too terribly happy about seeing Dick make that sort of a gap on him in one lap. After all, it is a long race. It's 100 laps of this circuit. That's a long way.
Alan Grice is the orange car. In 5th place, and Harvey is 6th, Richards is 7th, 33 is in 8th place, Bob Stevens. Masterton sticking well with Moffat.
He's not losing anything under brakes, where you'd expect a smaller and lighter car of Moffat to make a little bit of a gap. This is the new part of the circuit here. This is the part they've changed, and it hasn't advantaged the small cars terribly much, but it's given the big cars a lot more room to manoeuvre, and they're not leaning on their tyres as hard.
Terry Finnegan, who qualified in 9th position, into the pits.
That's bad luck for Terry, because after all he led the first round of the Endurance Championship at Amaroo Park in the rain and did it well, and I think he was making a big comeback here. Dick's driving awfully hard on those tyres. Dick had a bit of trouble in the warm-up session this morning. He broke a gearbox and he didn't have a replacement of the same ratio, so they had to fit the alternate ratio and change the diff ratio to suit.
You've won one of the long-distance races here in a Falcon, Bob, and it was a pretty difficult car to handle in those days. You had to treat it and the tyres very gingerly.
Well, any big car, you have to look after the tyres because that's their Achilles heel, and the tighter the corners, the harder it is on tyres.
So how do you see this at the moment, the race strategy, in terms of Falcons lying 1 and 3, Mazda RX-7 light and nimble in second place, and this car also light and nimble back in fourth place, the car that won the first round, and then of course the Commodore Harvey up into sixth. What's the strategy for those various cars?
Well, I think it's a matter of letting the race settle down a bit and letting everybody find their own pace. Nobody likes to see any of the competitors blast off into the distance, but it's a matter of judgment. If you think you're doing it easy, looking after the car, and that relates to the tyres mainly, then that's your pace.
Johnson leads Moffat by 1.14 seconds, and it's about 2.5 seconds back from third-placed Masterton to fourth-placed Fury.
Masterton left a tyre mark on the road there. He's really getting his boot into it. You notice he's pulling to the inside of the circuit here. Maybe he's wanting to get out of the slipstream. He's traditionally had overheating troubles with that car. I just hope he hasn't struck the same problem here again.
Moffat drawing onto Dick Johnson. In fact, doing it so quickly, one wonders if he's doing it a bit easily.
Well, I think Dick is easing off a little because he's now thinking of his tyres after the first couple of laps of throwing the car around. He's now thinking, and he's got to look after those tyres. Moffat's come up to him again. He hasn't been throwing the car around. He's driving nice and straight. I think there's a lot of strategy going on here in the heads of these drivers.
Thinks the race as well as anybody, and who can be very patient but at the same time completely determined, is Alan Moffat back there in second place.
Well, I think Moffat's in the box seat here. He knows that he has a lighter car than they do. He knows that he can go the distance driving at this pace quite easily, and he's really the one setting the pace. He's pushing Dick Johnson along. He's towing Steve Marston along. Steve has a lot to prove here. He's won quite a few sprint races, but he really hasn't done a lot in the long distance races, and this is Steve's big chance to show how good he is in the long distance race.
Moffat, of course, will be using a different driver for part of the race. Johnson will be doing the race solo. Moffat will be using Greg Hansford. Masterton's going solo, so too is George Fury, but in the Marlborough Holden dealer team car, John Harvey will be handing over to young David Parsons.
We've just been advised that car 33, that's the Mike Berg in an RX-7, has had a minute penalty for rolling at the start.
Well, it's bad luck because they qualified extremely well in 6th grid position ahead of Grice, Peter McLeod, the defending Endurance Championship, Finnegan, Wilmington and Harvey.
That's one of the penalties of being at the front. You have all the officials looking at you if you do roll.
1.6 seconds cover the first three. From Johnson, the leader, back to third-placed Masterton. Bit of a further gap, though, to Fury. He's tailing a touch.
And then Grice in the Commodore, then the BMW of Jim Richards.
No, Harvey in front of him, and then Richards in 7th.
Moffat's not in a real hurry to get by. I think he's doing it fairly easily. He's letting Dick break the wind in front of him.
Terry Finnegan out incidentally with a broken axle. But as I was saying earlier, Alan Moffat, who appears to be right back to the top form that we know from him, out from racing since crashing very badly at very high speed at Surfers in May. And it's a delight to see him back, because his professionalism and determination and experience is very welcome. We were talking to him earlier in the day. Alan Moffat, welcome back to motor racing. It's been a long time since you crashed at Surfers Paradise in May.
Well, 3 months. It's the longest I have been away in 10 years of my career, and but we put it to good work, and the mechanics and myself have been working very hard on the car, and it's proof positive as our lap time yesterday.
Are you fully healed?
95.
And how keen are you?
Well, I think my times yesterday showed that I wasn't fooling around. We're always prepared to put our Peter Stuyvesant RX-7 on the front row, mate.
While you were away, did you think of retirement after injuring yourself for the second time in your career?
No, I didn't, Will, but you and all your other cohorts have. I've done nothing but interview about when I'm going to retire, when am I going to give up, but I better say to the world I don't plan to do that in a hurry.
So you still want to be actively involved in the team?
Well, if I wasn't, I wouldn't stop. Yes, you know, that's the thrill of it, being right at the core of everything.
What about next year? Because the RX-7 doesn't seem so well suited to the new regulations.
I can't comment on anything we've got for next year, really.
Alan Moffat in the middle of a sandwich, which is 1.4 seconds only from first back to third place. From Johnson, the leader, back to Masterton third, two big Falcons.
We've just learned that Steve Marston also copped a minute penalty, presumably for rolling at the start, so he's not going to be a happy lad, being right at the front of the race and still being a minute behind.
Indeed. 7 laps completed, 93 remain, 260 kilometres, and Moffat looking down the other side of Dick Johnson at the moment, I think, happy to try and pressure Johnson to work his tyres a little bit hard, to hope for an error. But if Masterton continues to get closer, then Moffat will want to brake.
I think Moffat will just push Dick a little bit until his tyres get a little hotter, and you'll find that he'll dive under somewhere that's opportune without taking any risks, and we'll drive off into the distance, because the bigger Falcons just can't stand the pace around here and still look after their tyres, I don't think.
Fifth place, highest placed Commodore Alan Grice, car number 6. Somebody suggested that on the basis of his Le Mans experience we should call him Alain Grice, but doing a good job at the moment in the Commodore. On Avon tyres, Bob?
Yes, he's driving the car very hard, bouncing off a few curbs. He's got a long way to go. I think that he's driving the car quite hard. I don't know whether he really has much up his sleeve. He's just got to keep the pressure up and see what happens after the pit stop.
Second time Terry Finnegan's been into the pits. Qualified quite well in 9th place and going away, so he's well and truly out of it. Moffat tucked in tight and starting to look serious down the left-hand side of Dick Johnson. And got him. In traffic, Graham Lusty in front, and Dick out wide, didn't read it well. Moffat in like an arrow, which made you a little bit wrong, Bob Morris, because, of course, that was opportunism, but you said it would happen at this corner.
It appeared that Moffat was setting him up for the next corner, but Moffat just took the opportunity there with the slower car, and that's all it takes is one hesitation, and he's passed.
And in fact, there was less than 2 seconds over the first 4 cars at that time, and the interest now, of course, is to see what Moffat does now that he's in the lead, and he looks as though he's going to try and clear away.
The thing is, of course, Dick Johnson has Marston right behind him, putting pressure on him, so he can't afford to do anything dangerous, or he'll have Marston pass him too, and then shortly behind him, of course, is George Fury in the Nissan, and he's driving a very heady race.
And Dick's gone back to third as he gets boxed in again.
He's just misreading the traffic again, I think.
Moffat, on the other hand, has a lead of 1.1 seconds already. And Masterton, I would think, would be very keen from a sort of prove himself point of view to get up there and have a crack at Moffat if he can.
Well, I think Steve's been developing this car for a long time, and he's driving well enough.
And surely Johnson must have problems as Fury comes through now. So from race leader to fourth in about a lap.
This is Frank Gardner says, 0 to 0. I think Dick's in a bit of trouble with his rear tyres. He's had to maintain the pace early on, and he's paying the penalty now. It'll be interesting to see if Dick does make an early stop to the pits, 4 tyres, and then continue on in the race at a more sensible, or not so much a more sensible speed, but a more controlled speed without being pushed along by the other cars.
The Bluebird these days looks after its tyres fairly well, doesn't it?
A lot of that's in the setting up of the car and balancing the car, and of course most of it's in driving the car, and George has learned to drive this car very well, to look after the tyres, and I think he's going to be a real threat towards the end of the race.
With Moffat pulling out a little bit of a lead, it's 2.5 seconds between the first 3 cars. Third of them being this man, George Fury, in the Bluebird. And that, of course, is the car that, with Gary Scott aboard, that won the first round of the Endurance Championship. A most curious race at Oran Park 2 weeks ago. Peter Brock had 3 decisions to make that day, and he didn't make one of them right, did he?
Well, sometimes you have those days, and
Brock doesn't often, though.
But it all goes into the think tank, and all comes back out as experience. And I think at Bathurst, where the result really counts, is what he's looking at.
In 6th place, behind Moffat, Masterton, Fury, Johnson, Grice, is this man, Jim Richards, in the BMW 635. Unfortunately, very happy at the All Black result yesterday, collecting his bets in the pits this morning, but doing a good job. Now only 5.9 seconds behind Alan Grice, where 2 or 3 laps ago he was 6.6 seconds. A very quick car, Bob Morris, in terms of straight line speed, but in the past there's been difficulty in getting the tyres to sit nice and square to the road.
Yes, I think they've been doing a lot of work on the handling. Jim said to me that this car is handling much better this time at Oran Park than it was at the previous meeting, and I think this is a combination to watch later on in the race, because crafty old Frank Gardner, the team manager, said to me that they're going to try and get through this race without a stop, and they may or may not do it. It's going to be very marginal, but Jim is driving the car accordingly to save the tyres and try and make them last the distance. So it's a bit of a gamble. He's now 36 seconds behind Moffat, so it still leaves plenty of margin for Moffat to make a quick stop and get out in front of him, even if Jim can do the distance. But he's going to come right into contention at the end of the race if he doesn't stop.
In 7th place, in an unaccustomed position for a car bearing the number 05 and Marlborough sponsorship, is this car being driven by John Harvey and the new recruit to the Marlborough Holden dealer team, young Tasmanian dairy farmer David Parsons. Testing some new tyres, content to run back in the field. We've seen Harvey be a bit ragged on occasions, but would be holding 7th place just in front of Steve Masterton, who's holding 2nd on the road, only 2.2 seconds behind Moffat. But with a 1-minute penalty, Masterton would go back to 6th place behind Jim Richards and in front of John Harvey. You can see there that 33 is Mike Bergman and Bob Stevens giving Harvey a hard time at the moment. But they, with the eye on the major events, their hometown event, the Castrol 500, at Sandown, Bob, and of course Bathurst.
Yes, well, I think Bathurst is of course the big one, but the new event, the Castrol 500 at Sandown on the new revitalised circuit, should be quite an interesting event this year. You can see Peter McLeod coming up in the background here. He's starting to make a bit of a move.
And in fact, that's a battle between cars all on the same lap, because McLeod is just behind Bergman and Bergman's just behind Harvey. So this is a battle for 7th, 8th, 9th position.
It's surprising to see McLeod back so far. We have a couple of surprises today, because McLeod has been running right at the front all year, and he seems to have slipped back a bit for this one endurance race. Perhaps he's trying something different that we don't know about.
Well, Quite a tight sandwich between these three, and in fact, only about a second covering the three of them. And I don't know if it'll be resolved by Bergman and Bob Stevens, I think, driving it at the moment, getting around John Harvey, because he in turn is being pressured by Peter McLeod.
You may find that McLeod will pass both of them here fairly shortly.
McLeod in a wrong spot there. Very badly positioned, but by gee, it's worth sticking his nose in there.
Yes, well, I think McLeod has been hurried along a bit because he can possibly see Moffat in the background coming up to lap him, and it'd be fairly embarrassing to be lapped at this stage of the race.
Now, into the pits, I would have thought early, Bob Morris.
It seems to be fairly early to me. It's only 32 laps into the race, and they all seem to be standing around scratching themselves, so there does appear to be some abnormal sort of a problem. It could be an axle or a brake problem. They don't appear to be lifting the bonnet at all, and I think they're in a bit of trouble. They're pushing it away.
So, bad luck for George Fury and the Nissan team, and the car that won the first round of the Endurance Championship, the Scholastic 300 at Oran Park. As a car, it leads the Endurance Championship, Nissan Bluebird Turbo, on 25 points from Holden. In fact, Fury had got his helmet off and put his hat on before he drew up at the pits.
I think he wears that hat under his helmet.
And Peter McLeod from 9th place, having a real thrust and a successful one at Bergman.
Oh.
And is he blowing up? Curious, dreadful looking smoke out the back of the car, Bob.
Yes, it doesn't seem normal to have so much smoke.
But Alan Moffat looming up to lap them, and that gives you an idea of his progress through the field. 30 laps completed now, 70 remaining, and Alan Moffat coming up to lap 9th place.
9th position, yes.
Now McLeod working on John Harvey. Masterton penalised a minute for jumping the start, in big problems mechanically, now into the pits for 50 seconds as well, for the attention of a rather despondent pit crew with seemingly no answers.
Yes, I'd say that that's the end of the race for Marston. It's a great shame because he really showed what he was worth, running right up the front there and pressuring Moffat up to this point.
So the race situation changing dramatically now on lap 34, lap 35, they've completed 34. It is Moffat from Johnson from Grice 3rd, Jim Richards 4th, and 1 lap down is John Harvey, and then in car number 50 is Peter McLeod in 6th.
Really changes the whole complex of the race because it takes the pressure off Moffat somewhat, and it'll be interesting to see whether he eases the pace right down, and he may forget about Jim Richards trying to get through without a stop.
Steve Masterton coming into the pits in the Falcon after just only 30 laps of Oran Park. What was the problem?
Oh, the engine boiled again. I don't know, you got any advice? Look, the car is fantastic to drive. I had to drop the lap times a second a lap and keep a distance between Moffat because with his exhaust being out the back, I was copping the hot exhaust in the grill. The engine was running over 120 degrees Celsius, but only for that, the car would have been leading the race, no doubt about that.
John Harvey in big troubles in 05. The car was in 5th place outright. Some sort of mechanical problem, I would think. Bob Morris, can you pick it offhand?
Yes, it doesn't appear to be a tyre. He would have been going a little faster than that. I'd say it's something fairly serious to be driving so slowly.
He's done half a lap very slowly. He slipped already back to 7th place. In a moment, Neil Crompton will be with us. We'll get a time on his pit stop as well. But we wonder whether he can actually get the car back out and give David Parsons some time in the car in a race. And says, goodbye, crew. I'm going back to the pit area. So, end of race for the MHDT Holden Commodore. Jim Richards making life very, very difficult for Alan Moffat. Moffat would not be appreciative, I wouldn't think. How did you see it, Bob Morris?
Well, Jim may not have realised it was Moffat coming up to lap him, because at this stage of the race he perhaps wouldn't have expected somebody to be lapping him. And Jim, of course, is always a well-mannered driver. He left room for Moffat. He didn't sort of force him in any way, but he just made it difficult for him.
Half race distance, and the story in the pit so far is that of the early contenders, Steve Masterton has gone out of contention in the XC Falcon with overheating problems. John Harvey, we learn, has got gearbox problems with the Marlborough Holden dealer team Commodore, and George Fury and Christine Gibson, both in the Nissan team, are also out, and we'll be talking very shortly to George Fury and Howard Marsden as to what their problems were. Back shortly.
For what should be a scheduled pit stop in the race lead, Dick Johnson in second place. We'll keep an eye. Dick Johnson's coming round, and we'll hit the race lead in a moment. Out he gets. In goes the tall, lanky Queenslander, Greg Hansford. Former motorcycle ace. Hasn't done much driving this year. He's doing some rallying, and Dick Johnson's in the lead now. Goes down the straight at that moment. Second place, a lap down. We're looking at Alan Grice in car number 6 as they work furiously away, coming up to half a minute. Ready at the back end with tyres, and second place car not yet arrived. So Greg Hansford out on the track. This is the race leader though, Dick Johnson. Round at the back section of circuit, so that's how far ahead he is. And further back now, they're on lap 51, just completing their half distance. So it is Johnson from Greg Hansford now in second, Alan Grice, Jim Richards, Mike Bergman, and then Peter McLeod in 50.
Well, that was a good pit stop.
Jim Richards going down the inside of Alan Grice and claiming third place in the BMW as Alan Grice gets ready to pit. Peter McLeod has already come into the pits. And so as Alan Grice peels off and comes into the pit area, was in third place. He's back to fourth already. We'll get a stopwatch on him as he pulls up. But Jim Richards hoping not to pit at all for the 100 laps, 260 kilometres. On his way in the reshaped race, Johnson in the Falcon leading, from Hansford in the Mazda in second place, the Peter Stuyvesant car, then the JPS BMW in third place, Jim Richards. And there's Peter McLeod going to do the whole race. No, he's going to hand over to Graham Bailey, I think, although that looks like Bailey looking at the car and they've got problems. Bonnet up.
I'd say they've got fairly major mechanical problems. It looks like they're removing a spark plug there, and the car was smoking. I think they've been in trouble right from the start, and this is why they haven't been more competitive.
Let's hear from Neil Crompton.
Well, Peter McLeod has come into the pits in the Mazda RX-7, and although he's a busy man at the moment, it's very noisy down here. I've learned that they've got fuel starvation problems with the Mazda RX-7. Alan Moffat in the pits, leading from pole position on the grid and then driving away with the race so far. Very pleasing so far in the Mazda RX-7.
Yes, well, I got a terrific start, and I really thought I had the first corner, but Dick Johnson was very cheeky and snuck in along on the inside, and that was, I would have sold a castle for a little horsepower there in the first few laps. I hurt the tires more than I would have liked to, but once I got by him and was able to run at the rhythm that our RX-7 likes, then it was, I was able to pick up time every lap.
Alan, how does your hand feel?
It's not my hand, it's my head. It's the last time I'm driving when I got the flu, I'll tell you. That was a hard run.
And into the pits comes the race leader, Dick Johnson. So this should slot Greg Hansford in the Mazda into the lead. He's past the dog leg and down to VP corner, and we're ready with the stopwatch as he stops now. And let's see how good a stop he can do. Hansford in the meantime goes by into the lead. They've been racing for 1 hour and 13 minutes. And Dick Johnson on new tyres. It'll be interesting to see what he can do to Greg Hansford. He was losing just a little bit of ground as he at the latter part of this run for Johnson, but the tyres were probably then at their worst. Jim Richards is coming round and I think will take second place. Johnson will lose that. In fact, he goes into second place for BMW. So Johnson now is third, a 46.3 second pit stop. Could have been sharper, Bob Morris.
Not a bad stop. You know, the big car has very large wheels to manoeuvre on and off, and they have 5 wheel nuts instead of 4 of the smaller cars, and they do have to put quite a deal of fuel in, so it wasn't a bad stop considering.
Well, now if Jim Richards can keep going without stopping, could be quite a good battle between him and Johnson, who laps faster for second place, and that's a matter of seeing what Richards can do against Greg Hansford.
The question is going to be whether Johnson's crew will be aware that the BMW is not intending to stop.
John Harvey into the pits early in the race in the Marlborough Holden Dealer Team Commodore. What was the problem?
It broke third gear, which is a little unusual. However, it did, and I think probably the greatest disappointment of the weekend is the fact that young David Parsons didn't have a drive with us. But however, he'll get plenty of driving at both Sandown and Bathurst. We used the weekend for testing purposes. We tested some other items and factors on the car, which we think will help us later on in the season. But what else can I say? It was just bad luck we didn't finish.
Good luck at Sandown.
Thank you.
On the new Bitchapave section of circuit, it's Jim Richards in second place in the BMW number 31, but looming up very closely behind the bright green Falcon of Dick Johnson in third place. He was 9 seconds behind when he'd sort of settled himself in after his pit stop for tyres, Johnson, but has very quickly made up a lot of that ground. It's now less than 5. So in the next lap or so, I think Johnson will be wanting second place back. It'll be interesting to see whether he can do anything about Greg Hansford leading the race by 36 seconds over Richards in Alan Moffat's Mazda. Here's the situation at 3/5 total race distance. So, and quite a lot likely to change, I'd suggest, in the next 40 laps. The race perhaps at its most interesting at this stage.
Well, Jim's driving the car very conservatively to look after the tyres to try and make them last the 250 kilometres, whereas Dick just has a fresh set on and he can really bore into them. And of course, if he has any chance of winning the race, he really has to get into it now.
Frank Gardner, team manager for the BMW team. With so many early retirements, your ever-reliable BMW looking very good at this stage.
Well, it's a bit strong. I'd like Dickie Johnson to lose a little bit of horsepower. He's had his pit stop and he's pulling us back in again, so we're about to slip back to third, but we're pretty happy at this stage. There's still quite a few laps to run and everything seems to be sitting nicely, so we'll just have to hang around and see.
Thanks, Frank.
And Jim Richards struggling to hold on to his second race position at 63 laps and indicating to Dick Johnson, go through. Dick Johnson's hauled him in from a deficit of 9 seconds when he came out after his pit stop to now, well, I think I misread Jim Richards' instructions there, but he did put a hand out the left window. But Johnson anyway claiming second place and going back into that position, and now it'll be interesting to see whether Johnson can haul in Greg Hansford in the leading car, Alan Moffat's Mazda RX-7, because Hansford, don't forget, has done very little car racing this year.
Alan Grice, the gears all packed away early in the race. What happened?
Yes, Crownwell and Pinion. We haven't done one for 2 years, and we've suddenly done one. So it's an area that we're obviously going to have to look at for Sandown and Bathurst.
What would cause that?
Well, it's not normally it's caused by lack of oil, but you can always pick that in the cars because you can actually smell the accurate diff oil burning inside the car. There wasn't that at all, so it's not an oil problem. I think it's just broken a crown wheel tooth or a pinion tooth.
Better luck next time.
Yeah, well, we'll be right.
In 5th place, but 2 laps down, is this car, number 51. Tony Mulvihill and Brian Nightingale appearing from Bathurst. They have completed 70 laps, 30 remain, or that's in fact the case with the race leader. They've only completed 68. The race leader is Greg Hansford at this stage in the Alan Moffat team car, number 43, and his lead is going out over Dick Johnson. It was 47.6, it went 47.8, and it's now 50 seconds to Johnson's 2nd place, 3rd place Richards. So 3 different cars in the first 3 places. 4th place, Mike Bergman in the RX-7 number 33. He's 2 laps down, and so too is Nightingale and Mulvihill in this car number 51. And it's a further 2 laps then to 6th place, car number 26, Bill O'Brien's Everlast battery service Falcon. And Alan Moffat coming up to lap him, to put Greg Hansford at least, to put him 3 laps down. Barry Seaton the father, Glenn Seaton the son, sharing one of the few 3-litre class cars in the event, this V6 Capri. But Glenn drafted into one of the big cars for Bathurst, I think, Bob. Bob Morris looks surprised, so I'm not sure about that, but I had heard that he was. But 2 very good drivers and also preparers of cars. They do a great job.
Yes, from young Glenn's driving that I've seen, he's going to be one of the stars of the future. 3 laps.
Well, in comes the Takiko Mazda in 5th place outright, but he is 3 laps down now. He's 1 lap behind Bergman in 4th place, who is 2 laps behind Richards 3rd, Johnson 2nd, and Hansford Moffat in the lead. A very good pit stop, 15 seconds. Excellent. And that was for the Tony Mulvihill, Brian Nightingale pairing from Bathurst. As Bergman goes through on them, in fact the car that leads them by 1 lap, and now by the 2nd lap. And the situation after 80 laps is this: 20 laps remain. We've got Greg Hansford well and truly in the lead within now 8.77 seconds of lapping the 3rd place man, Jim Richards, in the only 6-cylinder car in the race, the BMW 635, the V8 holding up in the hands of Dick Johnson, 2nd in the Palmer Tube Mills car. In 3rd place outright, Jim Richards in the JPS BMW number 31, but still hasn't stopped. He's 25 seconds behind Dick Johnson, 49 seconds behind Greg Hansford, or another way of looking at that is to say that Greg Hansford is within a couple of seconds of lapping him. And so Greg Hansford then will have lapped everybody in the field, bar 2nd placed Dick Johnson. He's doing a great job taking over where Alan Moffat left off, and continuing the job in grand style. 74 laps completed, 16 remaining. Sorry, 84 laps completed, 16 remaining.
Hansford won't be terribly anxious to pass Richards here because he knows that he only has to keep that buffer between himself and Dick Johnson, and with only 15 laps remaining, he has plenty of time up his sleeve. He just has to make sure that he keeps the car nice and safe together and concentrates on what he's doing, because sometimes in the latter stages of the race, when you really have to back off a little, you start hearing all sorts of strange noises that apparently weren't there earlier.
And here's Greg Hansford making his way through on Jim Richards now as they complete lap 86 and leave themselves with 4 remaining, and he's wasn't quite through. And Richards then giving him a nice run down on the left side.
Yes, that was good driving by Jim Richards to acknowledge that Hansford was there and signal the side that he wished to be passed on. It really doesn't make any difference to the result of the race whether he's on the same lap or the lap behind. In fact, Jim would want him to go past because that's one less lap that Jim has to do on the fuel that he has left and the tyres that he has left. So it's good thinking on Jim Richards' part. Dick Johnson's still pressing on in second position. He's driving the car nicely. He knows that he can't catch Hansford in the RX-7, so he just has to consolidate his position and try and bring the car through to the end.
What's more, as a driver, he would go to second place, funnily, in the driver's point score in the Endurance Championship if he finishes in second here. Now, Gary Scott got 25 for his win at Amaroo, but Ron Harrop and Andrew Harris, who took second, therefore only got 11.5 each. Johnson, for going solo, will get the full 23 points. And so he'd be ahead then of Peter McLeod, who got 20 at Amaroo Park. So he's, in overall series sense, going well. Into the pits comes Jim Richards from third position in the BMW 635, a precautionary stop because he's 3 laps in front of fourth placed Mike Bergman in the Mazda RX-7. So there's no miscalculation about this. It's a safety and sensible stop, and they can do it quite casually. He was 34 seconds behind Dick Johnson when he came in. A quick stop, a little sip of a drink for the driver, and fuel churn out on the same tyres. And down in the pits, let's hear from Neil Crompton.
Frank Gardner, what was that pit stop all about for Jim Richards?
Well, we were going to run through all the way. There was no problem in running through, but the temperatures have altered a little bit since practice and tyre wear, so we thought we'd be on the safe side, take on 2 tyres, half a churn of fuel, because there's 10 laps to go, or 8 now, and it'd be a bit silly to hang out there when we've got at least 2 laps to play with on the 4th place car.
And how did the tyres look when you got them off?
I think we got plenty. I haven't really inspected them yet, but I'm sure we were pretty right. Our calculations weren't bad, I don't think. Thanks very much.
94 laps completed, 6 only remaining in this second round of the Australian Endurance Championship. 5 now, as Hansford has piloted number 43 across the start-finish line for about the 45th time for him. Moffat came in at about lap 50, and he's done a great job with the car. He's 47 seconds in front now of Dick Johnson, and that lead has always been about that. It was 45, it went out to 49.9, it's come back to 47, so virtually status quo. And Hansford really very tidily, but sensibly, not risking anything, stroking the car along towards victory. This race won last year. It was the second endurance race win in a couple of weeks for George Fury and the Nissan team, having made their first win at Amaroo just a couple of weeks earlier, and that was their first win overall. But they were delighted to win here last year, but of course retired earlier this race with a blown head gasket and are out. Dick Johnson, incidentally, still holding second place and was second last year. Peter McLeod, Graham Bailey were third last year. Murray Carter. Greg Hansford was fifth, running the car solo in Alan Moffat's absence, and Terry Finnegan was sixth. Finnegan, another one who's had problems in this race this year.
be interesting if Dick Johnson does finish second in this race, because it'll be 3 years in a row that he's finished second in this race.
Yes, it must be frustrating him slightly. And there's the man of whom we speak, just having a bit of a contretemps with Bill O'Brien, who's in 6th place actually in the car number 26, the Falcon. And 6th place sounds good, but if I tell you that 3rd place Richards is down 1 lap on the leading 2, Johnson and Hansford, and then the next place Bergman is 3 laps behind the leader, and it's 5 laps behind then to car number 51, who is the Nightingale Mulverhill car, and so it's 5 laps also to Bill O'Brien. And in fact Dick Johnson now would have made it 6.
Well, Dick's done a creditable job here with this Falcon, because it's a tight circuit. It doesn't particularly suit the Falcon, and he's done a credible job, and full marks to him and his crew.
You did perhaps a more difficult one some years ago, when on behalf of the Alan Jones Seiko team you won here, and the car was a real pig in those days.
Well, it was its first race, and really it needed a fair amount of sorting, but you know, we did our homework and ran at a pace that we thought we could run, and we won the race. And that's what long distance races are about, pacing yourself, and if your car has the performance and the endurance, will you win?
I saw the 1980 world champion doffing his hat in those days, because he tried driving the thing and he wasn't too impressed, Alan Jones. But this man, who I think a lot of people in Australia who haven't seen him do so much here don't realise just how talented this driver is. He's been rallying this year to keep himself sharp, because he hasn't had any drives. Moffat's been running only 1 car in the Stuyvesant team, but he was one of the world's great motorcycle racer. He's won 12 International World Championship Motorcycle Grand Prix, and he was one of the great talents. Hansford's big error probably was sticking with Kawasaki when he had a big offer from Yamaha, and Yamaha at that stage were really hitting their straps, and he may well have won a world championship. He was very, very highly regarded, and in Japan he was something of a hero, particularly with the Kawasaki people. Unfortunately, late in his career, he had a couple of accidents, neither of which really were his fault. It's a measure of the man that he didn't ever try and blame the bike. But on one occasion he completely ran out of brakes, ran down an escape road, and he went so far down, still with absolutely no brakes, that he ended up hitting a marshal's car and did leg damage, which actually was quite extensive. And again, he's never made anything of it. I've learnt more about the extent of that very serious injury from his mother than Greg would ever part with. But he's out of motorcycle racing for good. Medically, he just cannot do it. His leg is not in good enough shape. But it's quite okay for car racing, in which, because we've seen him round over a period now of 2 odd years, people may think he's been doing a lot, but he's really done very little indeed, and he's making a great fist of it. He'd love to have more practice. He was very disappointed last year when he realised that he wouldn't be getting much time to hone his skills at all. As he said, he'd probably say of today that just starting to get sharp by the end of the race and won't be doing much more before I retire again for most of the season. He has a 49-second lead now, gone out a couple of seconds to Dick Johnson, and 1 lap over 3rd place Jim Richards. He comes round now and he goes out on his final lap. He's completed 99. He's completed, another way of looking at it, 259 kilometres, along with Alan Moffat. So this has been a great comeback by Moffat and the Peter Stuyvesant team. A rebuilt motor car, the one at Surfers, an absolute wreck. Left-hand drive car, because that suits Bathurst. And Hansford has done absolutely everything that's been asked of him here today. Great comeback for Moffat, who, as he says, is 95% fit. His left hand not quite as strong as his right, and also had a fracture in his sternum from hitting the steering wheel. The first round at Oran Park 2 weeks ago, won by Gary Scott, the Nissan Bluebird Turbo from Ron Harrop and Andrew Harris in a Commodore, Peter McLeod in a Mazda RX-7, the best placed Falcon, Paul Jones, back in 9th place. So the Endurance Championship looking interesting, and our interest in it will be in the Castrol 500 at Sandown, September 9. But this is the end of the second round, and a great run by Greg Hansford, victory to the Stuyvesant team and to Alan Moffat at an average speed of about 120 kilometres an hour in the second round of the Australian Endurance Championship, the Valvoline 250.
Well, I think that must rate Moffat as being the favourite for Sandown after his win here, because after all it's the new circuit with a lot more twists and bends in it.
And here's second place Dick Johnson coming towards the flag. Second here for the last 3 years, and getting very close himself to catching Jim Richards, who pitted and therefore is down a lap to him now. So there's Richards in third place, down a lap to Johnson, who takes second place in this round of the Endurance Championship. Neither the Moffat team nor Johnson competed in the first round at Amaroo. Richards did, but retired. So all the major placings in this going to people who didn't feature in the results at Amaroo. So let's have a look at the race result of the Valvoline 250. Actually 262 kilometres, 100 laps around this slightly changed Oran Park circuit under new ownership, and I might say quite inspiring ownership, doing a lot to the track. Mazda RX-7 from Ford Falcon from 6-cylinder BMW 635.
Greg Hansford, Alan Moffat, victory is sweet at round 2 of the Endurance Championship. For you, Greg, you haven't driven the car since last November, and Alan, a marvellous comeback for some 14 weeks off in racing. You both must be very happy.
Yes, I am, and I'm particularly happy to be here with Greg on his first win with our Peter Stuyvesant Mazda team. A lot of unkind words have been said about Greg's performance in the past, unkind and untrue, and I'm here to say I'm proud to have him as a co-driver at Bathurst. Here we come.
How did it feel, Greg?
Fantastic. Everything just went to plan, and I did what Alan said, and everything worked out great. So, no problem.
Congratulations, both of you. We'll look forward to seeing you at Sandown and Bathurst.
Well, we got a great team, and we're going to keep rolling.